When the CEO said, "My son needs your office," I told him, "Sure," and started working from home for good. A week later, he figured out I wasn't ever coming back. I'll never forget the day my CEO walked into my office and demanded I give up everything I'd worked for. He thought he was taking me down a peg, but what he really did was hand me the blueprint to my own quiet revolution. It was a Tuesday morning, and Lawrence Fitzpatrick, our CEO, just appeared in my doorway. This guy rarely ventured below the executive floor, so seeing him there in his impossibly expensive navy suit, with that practiced smile that promised nothing but his own way, felt totally surreal. "Got a minute?" he asked. He didn't wait for an answer before he stepped in and shut the door. For 6 years, I'd poured my life into Harrington and Associates, clawing my way from a junior analyst to a senior project manager. That corner office? The one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin? That was mine. I'd earned it through countless late nights, successfully bringing in over $12 million a year in new business. That natural light made every grueling day a little more bearable. Lawrence settled into the chair across from me, radiating the casual confidence of someone who owned the building, which, technically, he did. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he began. "My son Brandon just graduated from business school, and he'll be joining our team next week." My stomach dropped like a stone. I knew exactly where this was going. "He's going to need an office," Lawrence continued, gesturing around my space like a real estate agent. "And frankly, this would be perfect for him. Great view, plenty of room, really sets the right tone for a new executive." The words "new executive" hung in the air like a bad smell. Brandon Fitzpatrick had zero experience in our industry. Zero. But apparently, a fancy degree and the right last name qualified him for an executive position right out of the gate. "I was thinking you could move down to one of the interior offices," Lawrence said, his tone making it clear this was already decided. "Same square footage, just without the windows. We'll have facilities help you move your stuff this week." Something just clicked in my brain. 6 years of watching less qualified people get ahead because they golfed with the right crowd. 6 years of being the go-to person for every impossible client because I actually delivered. 6 years of watching this company's rampant nepotism play out while they pretended meritocracy was a thing. But instead of arguing, instead of showing even a flicker of frustration, I smiled. A warm, genuine smile. "Of course, Lawrence, I completely understand. Brandon should have a nice space to start his career." Lawrence actually looked surprised. He probably had a whole speech about being a team player ready. "Really, that's wonderful. I knew you'd understand. You've always been so flexible." "Absolutely," I agreed. "Actually, if it helps the transition, I can start working from home while Brandon gets settled. That way he can have the office immediately, and there's no awkward overlap with the move." The idea had just formed, crystallizing into something beautiful as I spoke. "That's incredibly thoughtful," Lawrence said, standing up and extending his hand. "This is exactly the kind of team spirit that makes Harrington great." I shook his hand, my pleasant expression unwavering. "Happy to help." Minutes after Lawrence left, Ashley, my colleague, materialized in my doorway. She'd clearly been lurking, waiting for the verdict. "Please tell me he didn't just ask you to give up your office for his kid." "He did." I started pulling up files on my computer, my mind already racing through the logistics. "And you just agreed?" "Just like that." Ashley's voice rose with righteous indignation. "You earned this office. You brought in the Carrington account single-handedly. Brandon Fitzpatrick has never worked a day in his life." "I know." I opened my email and started composing a message to Keith Morrison, our department director. "But fighting about an office seems exhausting, don't you think?" Ashley stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Who are you, and what have you done with a woman who once made a client cry during a negotiation?" "I'm being practical." I hit send on the email, formally requesting to transition to a work-from-home arrangement, effective immediately. "Besides, I've been meaning to set up a home office anyway. This just accelerates the timeline." What I didn't tell Ashley, what I hadn't even fully articulated to myself yet, was that a plan was forming. A beautiful, effortless plan that required nothing from me except patience. By Thursday afternoon, my home office was fully functional. I'd invested in a standing desk, an ergonomic chair that cost more than I wanted to admit, and a monitor setup that actually exceeded what I'd had at Harrington. My spare bedroom had transformed into a workspace overlooking my small garden, infinitely more peaceful than any corporate office could ever be. The company's VPN gave me access to everything. Our project management software, client databases, communication platforms, all of it worked exactly the same from my house as it did from that corner office. I could attend meetings via video call, respond to emails, manage my team, handle client communications without any disruption. Friday came and went. I completed all my deliverables, attended 4 virtual meetings, and even solved a crisis with the Peloton account that would normally have required me to run between 3 different offices. Instead, I made a few phone calls from my comfortable home setup while drinking coffee that didn't taste like battery acid. The next Monday, Brandon officially started. I saw the announcement email with his professional headshot. He had his father's smile and that same look of unearned confidence. His title read, Executive Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, a made-up position that sounded impressive while meaning absolutely nothing. I sent a polite congratulations email and continued working from home. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday passed. I completed a major presentation for the Carrington account, revised quarterly projections for Keith, and trained 2 junior analysts on our new data analysis protocol. All from my Garden View home office. All while wearing yoga pants. My productivity actually increased without the constant interruptions of office drop-ins, without losing an hour each day to commuting, without the energy drain of corporate small talk. I accomplished more work in 6 hours at home than I used to complete in 9 hours at the office. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Keith Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Hey, where are you? He sounded slightly confused. We've got the Carrington meeting in conference room in 10 minutes. I'm working from home, remember? I sent you that email last week. I pulled up my calendar, which clearly showed the meeting scheduled as a video conference. I'm logged into the video call already. Oh, Keith paused. Right. Yeah, that's fine. See you on screen. The meeting went smoothly. I presented the quarterly results, fielded questions from the Carrington executives, and walked them through our proposed strategy. Mr. Carrington himself complimented the thoroughness of my analysis. Through my video feed, I could see Brandon sitting in what used to be my office, looking somewhat lost as he tried to follow the technical discussion. The following Monday marked the end of my 2nd week working from home. That's when things got interesting. My phone rang at 9:15. Lawrence Fitzpatrick's name flashed on the screen. Good morning, Lawrence, I answered cheerfully. Where are you? His tone had shifted from last week's friendliness to something sharper. At home, working, just like we discussed. We discussed you working from home temporarily while you transitioned offices. His words came out clipped. That was 2 weeks ago. Actually, you asked me to give up my office for Brandon, and I suggested working from home to make the transition easier. You thought it showed great team spirit. I kept my voice perfectly pleasant, almost bemused. There was never a timeline mentioned for me to return. A long silence stretched over the phone. I could practically hear the gears turning in Lawrence's head as he replayed our conversation. I need you back in the office, he finally said. Why? I asked simply. Because that's where your job is. My job is managing projects, maintaining client relationships, and delivering results. I've done all of that and more over the past 2 weeks. I pulled up my meticulously tracked productivity metrics. My deliverables have been on time. Client satisfaction scores are up, and I've actually closed 2 new contracts. Geography doesn't seem to be limiting my effectiveness. This isn't negotiable. Lawrence's voice hardened into that authoritative tone executives use when they expect immediate compliance. I expect you in the office Monday morning. I'm afraid that won't work for me. I kept my tone polite but firm. I've discovered that remote work significantly improves my productivity and work-life balance. Since my performance hasn't suffered, in fact, it has improved, I don't see a compelling reason to return to the office. Your employment contract states that you work at our Austin location. I'd anticipated this argument. I'd spent a lovely evening last Tuesday reading through my entire employment contract with a glass of wine. My contract states that I'm employed by Harrington and Associates to perform the duties of senior project manager. It doesn't specify that those duties must be performed in a physical office. Several of our competitors have already adopted hybrid and remote work policies. We're a bit behind the curve, actually. Another long silence. We'll discuss this further. He hung up without saying goodbye. Ashley texted me 30 seconds later. What did you do? Lawrence just stormed through the office looking furious. I smiled at my phone and responded, just clarifying my work arrangement. The rest of that week, I waited. I continued working, continued delivering results, continued being available for every meeting and every client need. But I did it all from my peaceful home office, and I didn't return a single phone call asking about when I'd be coming back. Wednesday morning brought an email from Nicole Patterson in HR requesting a meeting to discuss my current work situation. I agreed to a video call that afternoon. Nicole appeared on my screen looking deeply uncomfortable, clearly having drawn the short straw for this conversation. So, we need to talk about you returning to the office. I'm happy to discuss it. What specifically concerns you about my current arrangement? Well, it's not standard practice. Other employees might think they can just work from home whenever they want. Other employees aren't managing 3 major accounts representing over 40% of our annual revenue, I said, having done the math. Naturally, other employees didn't agree to give up their office without complaint to accommodate the CEO's son. I think my situation is fairly unique. Nicole shifted uncomfortably. Lawrence feels it sets a bad precedent. Lawrence decided to give my office to someone with 0 experience in our industry because of family connections. That sets a precedent too, doesn't it? I let that hang in the air for a moment. Look, Nicole, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm simply working in the way that maximizes my effectiveness. If the company wants to make an issue of this, we can certainly explore that conversation. But I should mention that I've been documenting my increased productivity metrics and the circumstances that led to this arrangement. Nicole's expression shifted to alarm. The implicit threat was clear enough. If they pushed, I'd push back. And the narrative of a high-performing employee being displaced for nepotism and then punished for finding a solution wouldn't look great. Let me talk to Keith and see what we can work out, Nicole said quickly, eager to end the call. Thursday brought the next development. Keith Morrison scheduled a one-on-one video call. Look, he started, skipping pleasantries. You've put me in an awkward position. How so? Lawrence is breathing down my neck about getting you back in the office, but I can't argue with your numbers. You've been killing it from home. Keith rubbed his face tiredly. The Peton account expanded their contract because of the proposal you put together last week. That's an additional $2 million annually. I'm glad they were pleased. I kept my voice modest. But I've got other team members now asking why they can't work from home too. And I don't have a good answer. Keith looked genuinely frustrated. You've opened a can of worms. Maybe it's a can of worms that needed opening. I leaned forward slightly. Keith, half our work is digital anyway. Most of our meetings happen over video calls because clients are scattered across 3 states. The insistence on physical office presence is outdated, and you know it. That's not my call to make. But you could recommend it. I watched his expression carefully. You could point out that flexible work arrangements might help with retention and recruitment, especially since Donovan and Partners just announced a permanent hybrid policy. Donovan and Partners was our biggest competitor, and losing talent to them was a constant concern. Keith's eyes flickered with recognition. I'll think about it, he said non-committally. Friday afternoon brought the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Brandon Fitzpatrick called me directly, which surprised me since we'd never actually spoken. His voice had that slightly nasal quality of someone who'd never been told no. Hi. I'm trying to find the Carrington files. The client database doesn't have them listed under Carrington, and I need them for a meeting on Monday. They're filed under Carrington Industries, not just Carrington. There's a naming convention guide in the shared drive. I walked him through the navigation patiently, aware that this would likely become a pattern. Oh, okay. Also, I was looking at the Peton contract and I don't understand why we structured the payment terms this way. I explained the rationale, which had been based on 18 months of negotiations and understanding Peton's cash flow concerns. That seems complicated. Why didn't we just go with standard terms? Because standard terms didn't work for their budget cycle, and we would have lost a $2 million annual contract. I kept my voice educational rather than condescending, even though the urge was strong. The call continued for 40 minutes with Brandon asking increasingly basic questions about accounts I'd built from scratch. It became abundantly clear that he had no idea what he was doing and that his fancy executive title came with responsibilities he wasn't remotely prepared to handle. Monday morning of week 3 brought an unexpected email from Lawrence requesting an in-person meeting at his office. No video call this time. He wanted me physically present. I showed up Wednesday at the appointed time, walking into Harrington and Associates for the first time in 3 weeks. The office felt strange now, like visiting a place you used to live. Several colleagues waved, looking surprised to see me. Lawrence's executive suite was predictably impressive, all dark wood and leather furniture that screamed power. He gestured for me to sit, his expression unreadable. 3 weeks, he started without preamble. You've been working from home for 3 weeks. 18 business days. Yes. Brandon tells me you're very helpful when he has questions. Lawrence's tone suggested this wasn't entirely a compliment. I'm happy to help him learn the accounts. He has questions because you're not here to properly train him. Lawrence leaned back in his chair. Your presence in the office would make his transition much smoother. There it was. The real issue wasn't my productivity or my remote work arrangement. The problem was that Brandon needed a babysitter, and I wasn't physically available to hold his hand through every minor task. Brandon is welcome to call or email me with questions anytime. I've been responding within minutes to every inquiry. I folded my hands in my lap. If he needs more comprehensive training, we could set up daily video calls to review account management procedures. That's not the same as being here in person. You're right. It's actually more efficient because he can record our video sessions for reference, and I can share my screen to demonstrate processes in real time. I smiled pleasantly. Technology is wonderful that way. Lawrence's jaw tightened. I'm beginning to think you're being deliberately difficult. I'm being deliberately productive. There's a difference. I maintained eye contact. Lawrence, I haven't missed a single deadline, client meeting, or deliverable. My team's morale is high. My accounts are performing above projections, and I brought in new business. The only issue seems to be that my physical location doesn't match your preference. The issue is that you're not a team player. I felt a flash of anger break through my calm exterior. I gave up an office I earned without complaint. I agreed to work from home to accommodate your son's immediate needs. I've continued to deliver exceptional results while managing a complete shift in my work environment. I've been nothing but a team player. I paused, letting that sink in. What you mean is that I'm not being subservient. Lawrence's face flushed. Watch your tone. My tone is professional and factual. I stood up. If there's nothing else, I have a client call in 20 minutes. Sit down. We're not finished. I remain standing. Actually, we are. Unless you're planning to terminate my employment, in which case I'll need that in writing and you'll need to articulate exactly which performance standards I've failed to meet. I'm sure Nicole would be interested in that conversation, given that we both know the answer is none. The threat of a wrongful termination suit hung unspoken between us. Lawrence knew it. I knew it. And we both knew that any documentation of this situation would make the company look terrible. Get out, Lawrence said quietly. I left his office, walked past my old corner office where Brandon sat looking overwhelmed by spreadsheets, and drove home to my peaceful Garden View workspace. Thursday brought an email from Keith. Team meeting tomorrow. Your presence requested. The word requested rather than required felt significant. I joined the Friday meeting via video call. Keith had clearly been told to address the remote work situation because he spent 10 minutes explaining new flexible work guidelines that were being developed. Several team members looked excited. Ashley caught my eye through her camera and gave a subtle thumbs up. These guidelines will allow certain employees to work remotely on a case-by-case basis, evaluated based on performance metrics and job requirements, Keith explained, his tone carefully neutral. We're calling it a trial program. Translation: they were creating a policy framework that would let them save face while allowing me to continue working from home. The company couldn't admit they'd been wrong, but they could pretend this had been the plan all along. The weekend after my confrontation with Lawrence, I did something I hadn't done in years. I completely disconnected. No laptop, no work email, just 48 hours of reading books in my garden and pretending corporate politics didn't exist. Ashley texted me Saturday afternoon asking if I was okay, worried that Lawrence might retaliate somehow. I assured her I was fine. Better than fine, actually. Monday morning arrived with surprising developments. At 8:30, an email landed in my inbox from someone I'd never expected to hear from, Thomas Carrington himself, CEO of our largest client account. The subject line read, "Exceptional service." His message was brief but impactful. He wanted to personally thank me for the strategy presentation I delivered and mentioned that his board had been impressed enough to approve a contract extension worth an additional $5 million over 3 years. He specifically requested that I remain the primary point of contact for their account, noting that my expertise and responsiveness had been invaluable. I forwarded the email to Keith with a simple note, "FYI, Carrington renewal confirmed." Keith called me within 5 minutes. "This is huge. Lawrence has been trying to land an extension with Carrington for 18 months. They seemed receptive to the market analysis I provided." I kept my voice modest, though internally I was celebrating. "Did you happen to mention to Carrington that you're working remotely now?" Keith's question carried a hint of knowing amusement. It came up organically during our last call. Mr. Carrington mentioned his company implemented a remote work policy last year, and I mentioned I'd recently transitioned to working from home myself. He seemed to think it demonstrated forward-thinking adaptability. I paused. "Why do you ask?" Keith laughed. "Actually, he told Lawrence during their golf game yesterday that Harrington should be proud of embracing modern work arrangements. Said it showed the company was keeping pace with industry evolution." The irony was delicious. Lawrence had been trying to force me back to the office, and now his biggest client was praising the company for letting me work remotely. "Interesting timing," I said dryly. "You're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers," Keith said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Keep doing what you're doing." Tuesday brought another Brandon situation. He called me at 2 in the afternoon, his voice carrying an edge of panic. "I've got the Westfield people coming in tomorrow for a presentation, and I can't find the market research data we compiled for them. The presentation template is here, but all the slides are blank." I pulled up the Westfield account files. "Brandon, those presentations are customized for each meeting. We don't use pre-filled templates. You have to pull the relevant data based on what Westfield specifically asked to review." "But I don't know what they asked for." "Where's that information?" "In the email chain with their VP of Operations, Daniel Westfield. You should have been CC'd on all communications." I navigated to my sent folder. "I see that you were copied on 7 emails over the past month detailing their questions and concerns." A long pause. "I get a lot of emails." I closed my eyes and took a breath. "Brandon, this is a $6 million account. You need to read the emails, especially ones where clients explicitly state their needs. Can you just send me whatever presentation you use?" "I don't have one prepared because I didn't know they were meeting tomorrow." "When was this scheduled?" "Last week sometime. My assistant put it on my calendar." His assistant, Brandon, had an assistant while the rest of us managed our own schedules. The nepotism just kept giving. "Okay, here's what we'll do. Forward me the meeting invite and every email from Daniel Westfield. I'll compile a presentation outline, but you'll need to fill in the specific data points. I'll walk you through where to find everything." I was already pulling up the Westfield files, knowing this would consume my afternoon. "Could you just build the whole thing?" "I've got another meeting right now." "No, Brandon, I can't. You're the executive vice president. You need to understand these accounts inside and out. I'll guide you, but you have to do the actual work." I heard him sigh heavily, the sound of someone unaccustomed to hearing no. "Fine, send me the outline." The next 3 hours disappeared into walking Brandon through basic account management tasks that he should have learned in his first week. By 5:30, he had a functional presentation, though I had serious doubts about his ability to actually deliver it. Wednesday morning, Ashley called me before 8. "You need to hear this." "Hear what?" Brandon's Westfield presentation was a disaster. Like, career-ending disaster. He couldn't answer basic questions about their market position, confused their competitor data with another client's information, and apparently told Daniel Westfield that their concerns about market saturation were probably overblown. I winced. Westfield operated in a highly competitive sector where market saturation was a legitimate concern. Dismissing it showed either ignorance or arrogance, neither of which played well with clients. How bad? I asked. Daniel Westfield walked out halfway through. Just stood up, said, "Thank you for your time," and left. Lawrence had to personally call him this morning to smooth things over. Did it work? Who knows? But Lawrence looked ready to murder someone when he came out of that call. An email appeared in my inbox 30 seconds after hanging up with Ashley. Lawrence Fitzpatrick. Subject line, Westfield account. Immediate attention required. His message was terse. The Westfield meeting had not gone well. Daniel Westfield had expressed concerns about Harrington's understanding of their business needs. Lawrence needed me to personally reach out to repair the relationship. I crafted a careful response. I would absolutely reach out to Daniel Westfield, but I wanted to understand what had gone wrong in the presentation so I could appropriately address his concerns. Could Lawrence or Brandon provide notes from the meeting? Brandon's version of events arrived an hour later via email, and it was exactly what I'd expected, a message that blamed everything on the client being difficult and unreasonable while taking no responsibility for his lack of preparation. He actually wrote that Daniel Westfield seemed determined to be unimpressed regardless of the quality of the presentation. I didn't respond to Brandon. Instead, I called Daniel Westfield directly. "I heard yesterday's meeting didn't meet your expectations," I said after we exchanged pleasantries. I wanted to reach out personally and understand what happened. Daniel sighed, long and tired. "Look, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but that presentation was clearly thrown together by someone who hasn't been following our account. Basic facts were wrong. Strategic recommendations completely missed the mark. I've been working with you for 2 years, and suddenly I'm meeting with someone who knows nothing about my business. I apologize for that experience. There's been some internal restructuring, and clearly the transition hasn't been as smooth as it should have been." I chose my words carefully. What would it take to get this relationship back on track? Honestly, I want you back as my primary contact. No offense to Brandon, whoever he is, but he's not ready for an account of our size. Let me see what I can arrange. In the meantime, can we schedule a call for early next week? I'd like to review your current concerns and make sure we're aligned on priorities. That would be great, and tell whoever made the decision to switch my account manager that it was a mistake. I sent a detailed email to Lawrence after the call, professionally outlining Daniel Westfield's concerns and his request to work primarily with me going forward. I included specific examples of what had gone wrong in the presentation and recommendations for how to prevent similar issues in the future. Lawrence's response came 2 hours later. "Please resume primary management of Westfield account. Brandon will shadow for training purposes." Translation: Brandon had been demoted from managing the account, though they couldn't officially call it that. He would shadow me, which really meant I'd be doing all the actual work while he hopefully learned something. Thursday brought a video call that Keith had labeled strategic planning session, but was clearly about damage control. Besides Keith and me, Nicole from HR was present along with Greg Sullivan, the company's CFO. Greg spoke first, his tone businesslike. "We need to discuss resource allocation and account management structure. Corporate speak for, we need to figure out how to fix the Brandon problem without admitting we have a Brandon problem. Over the past month, we've noticed some inconsistencies in client satisfaction scores," Greg continued, pulling up a spreadsheet. "Several key accounts have expressed concerns about communication gaps and knowledge continuity." I stayed quiet, waiting to see where this was going. At the same time, Nicole added carefully, "We've seen that certain team members working remotely have maintained or even improved their performance metrics and client relationships. What we're proposing," Keith jumped in, "is a new account management structure that prioritizes client relationships and knowledge continuity over physical office presence." I kept my expression neutral. They were essentially creating a system that would let me keep managing my accounts from home while allowing Brandon to save face by maintaining some nominal involvement. We'd like to formalize your role as Senior Client Relations Manager, Greg said. It would come with a salary increase and official authorization for permanent remote work. You'd be responsible for maintaining relationships with our top-tier accounts while also developing training protocols for junior executives. Junior executives like Brandon, I said, making it explicit. An uncomfortable pause settled over the call. Finally, Keith nodded. Among others. We're expanding the team, and we need someone with institutional knowledge to establish best practices, and this role would be entirely remote. Entirely? Nicole confirmed. Yes, Greg said. We'd actually like you to help us develop a comprehensive remote work policy. Your experience over the past month has shown that it's viable for certain positions. I pretended to consider it, though we all knew I'd accept. The salary increase alone was significant, but more importantly, they were essentially giving me everything I wanted while pretending it had been their idea all along. I'd need autonomy to manage my accounts without interference, I said. If I'm going to be responsible for client satisfaction, I need to make strategic decisions without needing approval for every minor detail. That's reasonable, Greg agreed. And the training program needs real structure, not just shadowing, but actual curriculum development with measurable outcomes. Keith nodded. We can work with you on that. Then I accept. After the call ended, I sat in my home office feeling a surge of satisfaction. They tried to push me into a windowless interior office to make room for the boss's underqualified son. Instead, I'd ended up with a promotion, a raise, permanent remote work, and the authority to develop company policy. Ashley's text arrived within minutes. Tell me everything. I called her instead, and she picked up before the first ring finished. You're glowing through the phone. What happened? I just got promoted to Senior Client Relations Manager with a 15% salary increase and permanent remote work authorization. Ashley's scream of celebration was loud enough that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Are you kidding me? That's incredible. It gets better. They want me to develop the training program for new executives. So basically, you get to show Brandon how terrible he is at his job while getting paid more to do it from home. That's one way to interpret it. This is the most satisfying thing I've heard all year. Lawrence tried to push you out for his son, and instead you got promoted. The irony is beautiful. I'm just doing my job, I said, though we both knew that wasn't the full story. Right. Sure. Whatever you say. Ashley paused. Are you going to come into the office at all? Quarterly meetings, probably. Client dinners when necessary, but day-to-day? No. Why would I? The following Monday, I started my new role. The first item on my agenda was a comprehensive review of all major client accounts and their current status. What I found was concerning. Brandon's month of managing accounts had left several relationships strained beyond just Westfield. The Morrison account had 3 unanswered emails about timeline concerns. The Peton team had called twice looking for quarterly reviews that were apparently overdue. Sterling Industries had submitted a detailed request for proposal that seemed to have been ignored entirely. I spent 2 days just triaging the mess, reaching out to clients with apologies about delays and scheduling catch-up meetings. Most were understanding once they heard my voice again, though a few made pointed comments about hoping for more consistent communication going forward. By Thursday, I had a clearer picture of the scope of the problem. I compiled everything into a detailed report for Keith, professionally documenting the issues without explicitly blaming Brandon. The facts spoke for themselves. Keith called me after reading it. This is worse than I thought. These are fixable problems, but they need immediate attention. Most clients are willing to give us another chance, but we've definitely damaged some trust that took years to build. What do you need? Time and direct access to clients without intermediaries. Also, Brandon needs structured training before he touches another major account. These aren't learning opportunities. They're relationships worth millions of dollars. Fair enough. Put together a training plan, and I'll make sure he follows it. Over the next 2 weeks, I rebuilt the relationships Brandon had damaged while simultaneously creating a training curriculum that covered everything from client communication basics to advanced negotiation strategies. I structured it like a real educational program, complete with reading materials, practical exercises, and assessments. Brandon attended our first training session via video call, his expression suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. I walked him through the fundamentals of account management, using real examples from our client base, while being careful not to explicitly highlight his mistakes. "Why do we need all this documentation?" he asked during a segment about maintaining detailed client communication logs. "It seems excessive. Because 6 months from now, when a client references a conversation about their expansion timeline, you need to know exactly what was discussed and what was promised. Memory isn't reliable enough for multi-million-dollar commitments. But that's what assistants are for." I counted to 5 silently. "Your assistant wasn't in the meeting. You were. The documentation is your responsibility." The training sessions became a twice-weekly occurrence, each one revealing new gaps in Brandon's understanding. He wasn't stupid, exactly, but he clearly never worked in an environment where his last name didn't guarantee success. The concept of earning client trust through consistent competence seemed foreign to him. 3 weeks into my new role, something shifted. Brandon called me outside of scheduled training hours. His voice was different, quieter, less defensive. "I think I messed up the Sterling proposal." "What happened?" "I sent them the revised terms we discussed, but they came back saying this wasn't what they asked for. I'm looking at the email thread, and I think I might have misunderstood what they wanted." Progress. He was actually recognizing his mistakes. "Forward me everything and let's review it together." We spent an hour on the call, and I walked him through where his interpretation had diverged from Sterling's actual request. To his credit, he listened without making excuses. "How did I miss this?" he asked, sounding genuinely frustrated with himself. "Because you're not reading carefully enough. You're skimming emails and jumping to conclusions instead of taking the time to fully understand what clients are actually saying. It's just so much information." That's the job, Brandon. Managing accounts means managing details. There's no shortcut. After that call, something changed in our dynamic. Brandon started asking better questions during training sessions. He began keeping the detailed logs I'd recommended. His emails to clients became more thoughtful and less presumptuous. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but it was movement in the right direction. Ashley kept me updated on office dynamics. Apparently, my promotion had sparked conversations about career advancement and remote work opportunities. Several team members had requested flexible work arrangements, and management was scrambling to create consistent policies. "You started a revolution," Ashley told me during one of our regular catch-up calls. "People are realizing they don't have to accept whatever scraps management throws their way." I just wanted to keep doing my job effectively. "Right. But you showed everyone that standing firm on what you need isn't the same as being difficult. Half the office is taking notes." Brandon didn't last 3 months. I heard through Ashley that he spent most of his time asking increasingly frantic questions, missing important details on client accounts, and generally floundering in a role he'd never been qualified for. In June, a quiet announcement mentioned that Brandon Fitzpatrick had decided to pursue other opportunities. My old corner office went to Ashley, who deserved it. She'd earned that promotion through years of solid work, and watching her excitement made me genuinely happy. Lawrence never spoke to me directly again. All communication went through Keith, which suited me perfectly. The flexible work policy expanded over the following year, with half our department eventually working remotely, at least part-time. Productivity metrics across the board improved, and the company saved money on office space. They even put out a press release about their progressive approach to modern work arrangements. I still work for Harrington and Associates, still managing major accounts and bringing in revenue. My home office with its garden view has become my permanent workspace. I take walks during lunch breaks, work in comfortable clothes, and never waste time commuting. Sometimes Ashley video calls me just to show me the view from what used to be my corner office. "You could have fought for this," she'll say. "You could have kept it." Maybe. I always respond. But then I'd be sitting in an office right now instead of planning to take my laptop to a coffee shop this afternoon just because I feel like it. The best part? Every time I log into a video meeting and see colleagues crammed into conference rooms or sitting in interior offices without windows, I remember Lawrence Fitzpatrick asking me to give up my space without hesitation. I remember how I smiled and said, of course, while already planning something better. They thought they were taking something from me. Instead, they gave me freedom, flexibility, and a blueprint for the future of work. All while thinking they were doing me a favor. Lawrence probably still doesn't realize that asking me to move wasn't a power play he won. It was the best career decision I ever had to make myself. Some revenge is loud and dramatic. Mine was quiet and permanent. I didn't fight for an office. I simply declined to return to one. And honestly, that view from my home office beats any corner office in downtown.